Okay, welcome to our episode 2 on the Constitution series. I hope you've listened to episode 1 because if you haven't, I would advise you to actually pause this and play that to have a better understanding on what we're going to be discussing today. In the previous episode, we discussed on what a constitution is. We discussed on the types of constitution and, of course, the characteristics of Nigerian constitution. And today, we'll be discussing on the sources of a constitution, the sources of the Nigerian constitution, and why, in fact, do nations need the constitution. I remain your good host, Blessings Udoh, and with me is
Toby Oraka.
Thank you. So I'll hand over to my co-host to give the introduction. Enjoy.
Okay, guys, so welcome to this second episode as rightly introduced. We will be discoursing now on the sources of a constitution. Yeah, so we're discussing on the sources of Nigerian constitution. Sources of a constitution. Now, you are going to be in a previous episode, for those of us that have listened to it, we discussed what a constitution is. We also discussed the type of constitution, and we also discussed the characteristics of the constitution. Now, we will be discussing the sources of a constitution, right? So now, a constitution source change from country to country. Nigeria's source may be different from the UK. The UK may be different from Sweden. Sweden may be different from Russia. You see? So the sources of a constitution varies from countries to countries. Everybody adopts their own source and mechanisms that works for them. Many constitutions are based on historical facts that may have arose from disputes and reactions to questions about the state's existence. So what this sentence is saying is that as the source of constitution, right? So we will say now that a constitution originates or has its source from different historical facts that arose from disputes one way or the other, or reactions to questions about the state's existence. Let's also say that using Nigeria, for example, because of course we're in Nigeria. To those of you listening outside Nigeria, let's just use Nigeria, as an example, right? So the historical facts of Nigeria, you know that from history that the British colonized us, right? So what do we expect? We expect that Nigeria adopts some major or some level of the British drafting model, or some one or two lines or phrases. Yes, you will agree with me, because in our constitution, you will see that some things we write or some things that are in our constitution perhaps has its historical origins from the British during colonization, right? So that's what this is saying, that it is based on historical facts, or it arose from dispute and the nation wants to resolve the dispute. Hence, it pens it down directly in the constitution and says, oh, we want every person in Nigeria to have a right to life, Perhaps if there was genocide, let's just say, in history once upon a time, the leaders of the present times will come together and say, oh, this happened in the past. We do not want it to happen again. Hence, we include the right to life in our constitution, adopted, stamped.
I think, Toby, if we're even looking at it, there are parts of the constitution. You're talking about the fact that the British colonized Nigerians, yes? There are parts of the constitution that explicitly states that there is something we call common law, right? Now, common law, this is the common law generally originally it came up from England. It was practiced in England, but due to our relationships our historical relationship with England, the British, when Nigeria became an independent nation, we still adopted these common laws in places where there is no local legislation that governs that particular issue. Some people still bring it in courts, even common law is persuasive. It could be persuasive in certain situations where local legislation actually exists. But where it doesn't exist, the common law is actually a law in Nigeria. Do you understand? So some of the laws contained in the constitution have been informed by the common law, which is, of course, a British law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well explained. I'm sure the listeners have a more elaborate understanding on these points. Now, thank you, Blessings, for that crucial point. Now we go over to conventions, customs, traditions, acts of parliament, judicial precedents, writers and elder states' opinion, or the elder statesmen's opinions, judgments of national conferences, international agreements, academic study, and opinions and military decrees are some of the origins of a constitution, right? So generally speaking, you have conventions where nations come together and agree on a certain policy, or agree on a certain right, or agree on a certain how will I say now, a certain liberality. Let's use that word. For example, the visa stuff, where it's actually passports per se. If you have a US passport, you have access to different countries without having a visa, you see. So it may have come as a result of different conventions. So don't forget US visa or US passport, so to say. But Nigeria also gives some certain access. Just to elaborate on this passport thing, Nigeria has some certain free zone access. You can access those nations without you having to apply for a visa. Just by you having a Nigerian passport, you can access those countries. I think you also look it up and see the countries you can access by just having a Nigerian passport. And those of us that were born in the US, I mean, I'm not saying I was born from the US, don't get me wrong, but those of you that have those of you that have the US passports, you can of course Google up the countries you can travel to visa free, right? Yeah. So don't forget, just to remind you, that the sources we are discussing now is the general source, right, of where nations adapt and draft their constitution. So you have the historical facts, the reaction from dispute. Now you have the conventions, and you also have customs and traditions, right? So what are customs and traditions? You agree with me that these, in a short form, will be norms of the people, what the people agree and they do and practice are regarded as customs and traditions. So let's say in Nigeria, we have a custom of saying, let's just not use something basic. See, let's say we have a custom of saying everybody must have a house, right? Everybody must have a right to a house in Nigeria, right? In Edo State, everybody must have a right to house. In Abuja, everybody must have a right to house. So when these things are peculiar in different states, aka when they are common to different states of the country, it's common in Edo State that everybody must have a right to house. It's common in Kaduna State. It's common in Jigawa State. It's common in Jos. It's common in Osun, right? So once these customs and traditions are common in these various states, then we adopt it in our constitution for the benefit of everybody, just so it can be there. And nobody says, oh, I didn't know. Because ignorance of the law is not an excuse. We'll get to that. It's in the criminal code. Let me not take you too far. We move now to acts of parliament. Of course, in our Nigerian, well, we'll come to that. So let me not say Nigerian. for Acts of Parliament, let's use the British Parliament here. We've made mention in a previous series, or rather in a previous episode, that the British has an unwritten constitution, right? So what their source per se will be those other documents from the Act of Parliament itself that are not written. That is their major source of the Constitution, because you agree with me that they don't have any codified document, like we explained earlier. So where their own source comes from is majorly from the Act of Parliament. They have judicial precedents. Of course, judicial cases and case laws can be a source of the Constitution. What the judges have decided, the fellow legislators or their counterparts can enact them as laws. Then writers and elder statesmen's opinion. So once you have, for example, the courts may not understand a specific legislation, right? So they invite a friend of courts. They are also called the amicus curiae for those of us that are law students or in the legal field. Now, what this friend of courts, aka the amicus curiae, does is to give their opinions on certain matters as regards to the legislation in quotes that helps the judges to decide on the case at hand, right? So you can have the writer's opinion or elder statesman's opinion in as a source of constitution. Then, of course, judgments of national conferences, international agreements, e.g., the UDHR, the most popular 1948. Then the academic study and opinions, professors, PhD holders, doctors, philosophers, those guys are brainiacs. So why not? Military decrees. Of course, we have a lot of military decrees translated into law. But we'll get to that. What we're doing here now is to just bring to your notice the sources of a constitution in the generalized sense. And as we progress in the episodes, as we progress in the parts, you would know what these things are to the atom, right? So these are the sources of a constitution generally. So we move on quickly to the sources of the Nigerian constitution per se. Now, you agree with me that in the previous episode, my co-host Blessing explained that a characteristics of the constitution is that it is made by the people. So that is the first thing here as a source of the Nigerian constitution itself, is that the people's customs and traditions are included in the Nigerian constitution, right? I would want to give an example, but we will explain this in subsequent series, so it doesn't look like duplication of what we're going to speak about. But just have it in mind now that the people's customs and traditions are part of the constitution as we speak. It's a source of the Nigerian constitution. We go over to the historical origins. We just explain that in a generalized sense for which the law is formed or from which it is enacted, the historical origins. Just to bring to your notice again, we're colonized by the British. So some British laws have been adopted and translated into Nigerian laws. For example, the common laws that my co-host Blessing has just made mention of. Now, these laws have been translated into Nigerian laws. Then as we go further, of course, we'll bring to your notice these laws in specific, but just know that. Then we now have the previous constitutions and judicial precedents, which serves as a source of the Nigerian constitution. So we've had series of constitution in the past, 1922, Clifford's constitution, up to the Republican constitution of 1990. Republican Constitution. Blessing, help me out. What year was that?
1963.
1963.
Too much knowledge.
I almost lost my stand there, but thank you for that. 1963. So you can draw the source of your constitution from your previous constitution enacted by the parliament or enacted by the House of Assembly, that is the Senate or the House of Representatives. Now, going further, you also have opinions of political and constitutional writers. Of course, we have a lot of them in Nigeria. You'll agree with me that we have some bright minds in Nigeria who are political analysts, they are political critics, they are constitutional amicus curiae.
Yeah.
They are called upon to how will I say this now? They are called upon because they are
I think,
intellect.
yeah, they are seen as experts in that particular
Those
aspect.
guys with white hair, respect them.
You know, like when you're talking about law of contracts in Nigeria, the law of Nigerian contract, the first name that comes to your head is Sagi.
Sage, of
The man
course,
is a brain.
SNGA.
The man is a brain. Okay.
White hair. Anybody with white hair, respect them, as a matter of fact. But going on, international conventions and treaties. See, so we made mention of this already, but to bring back to your memory, you have the UDHR, the African Charter. These two are examples of international conventions that Nigeria is treaty and privy to, and of course has been signed and domesticated in our law. The African Charter, of course, an example. But we won't bore you with the details, or rather the deets, as we call it in Generation Z. The deets. I think that's what we say, the deets. So we have spoken about the source of the Constitution generally. We have spoken about the source of the Nigerian Constitution. Then now we will be looking at why nations need this Constitution. Right? Over to you, Blessing. I need to hear from you.
Wow. Okay. You miss my voice, Abby. But yeah, now. Okay, basically, why do we need Constitution? First of all, I think the best scenario would be, as much as one would say, how much are these laws actually practiced, of these laws actually implemented. Now, imagine a scenario in Nigeria where we didn't have a constitution, where we didn't have a rule. I think once you're able to properly imagine that, you would then see the essence of the constitution. Because you would see cases, for instance, let me give a scenario where you have a state having a case against another state as to a boundary. That you imagine where we had touts of these different states actually shooting themselves. Is our own? Is our own? No, we have laws
like
that guide how that is
Peninsula case.
Exactly. You know, when you spoke about judicial precedents as a source of the Nigerian Constitution, I would believe that we have cases. I think there was a point where Lagos was having a boundary issue with Ogun State. There's a case like that. And I am quite sure, if not once or twice, the lawyer representing whichever state would refer to what had happened in the case of the Bakassi case and the like. So these were sources. These laws, we're not hooligans. We're not laymen. We know, oh, this is how it is done. This is what the law says on this matter. So the law acts as an objective standard. We do not just move according to emotions and all. The law says this is how it should be done. So this gives you an idea as to why we need the Constitution. Now, the Constitution basically defines the relationship of people with government. It helps determine how a government is to be elected. We don't just say, oh, nobody just know, I want to be the president. I don't care about what you people think, I'm the president. This other person says I'm the president, like what we have now, where we have everybody. These people need to explain this 100 million naira store, guy. But where we have everyone saying that they are buying nomination forms for presidency. Imagine where we didn't have a constitution which states how the government comes into power. That means anyone can easily declare that they want to be the president. So it shows you the essence of the constitution in that context. No one can just say I'm the president, except to follow what the constitution has stated as to how one becomes a president, which you
Mhm.
have elections. That it states democracy, that we practice democracy in Nigeria. So it also sets standards and procedures that are necessary to live in peace for individuals belonging to various groups, various individuals. The constitution sets how we relate with each other. As a person, I understand that the constitution gives another person a right to privacy, gives another person a right to life. That is why where a person kills another person, one can easily go to court. Remember what we stated in our previous episode, where we were like, the court enforce the law, they enforce the constitution. And now the constitution has stated that everyone is entitled to life. Now you have deprived this person of his life. What happens? The court comes in to enforce the law. You don't just go scot-free. That means the court puts a cautionary measure in the sense that when I know it helps. Of course, we have cases where people still ignore this law, but imagine where this law was not even in place. Now, also, it sets how, as I stated earlier, governments will be chosen and who will have the authority and duty to decide things. I stated earlier, we vote, we practice democracy. The idea of democracy is clearly stated in the constitution that Nigeria will practice democracy. That is where we now have the notion that this is how a government comes into power, right? It is stated in the constitution. So it defines the parameters of the government's control. It defines the limits of the government's control over human beings. That's why one could say my right has been infringed by even the government. We stated in the characteristics of the constitution about rule of law. The government is not above the law. So where the government can infringe someone's rights as stated in the constitution. With all these instances, you see the importance of the constitution in defining and guiding the relationship between people and people, people and government, government and government. That's why we
Mhm.
can say the federal government knows its limits. The state government has jurisdiction, the local government has the jurisdiction. All this is stated in the constitution. So
Mhm.
it helps create a coexistent world for each individual to enjoy himself and still respect the rights of others.
Mhm.
Right?
So
Now,
from what you said, listen, sorry to call you short. From what you've said, it means that not just nations have constitution, right? But
yeah.
it means that other parties like religious groups have their own constitution that governs them. Political
Mm-hmm.
parties have their own constitution that governs them.
Yeah.
Industries have their own constitution that governs them, right?
Yes, exactly.
Fantastic.
To be let's start with what you stated. You stated religion. For instance, we have the Sharia law. The Sharia law derives its power from the constitution, and the Sharia law itself guides a certain sect of people which are identified by a particular religion, Islam, right? So these laws generally derive its authority, its validity from the constitution, and thus guides the relationship of these people. Then with all this, you can see that the constitution itself enables a stable government and protection of sovereignty. Remember when we're talking about the um, characteristics of the constitution, where we stated that it is made by the people. So if the constitution is made by the people, that means the people are seen as, okay, these are the people who made the constitution is supreme. So it ensures that no one is above the law. That means no one is above Nigerians as a whole. It
Mhm.
prevents despotism, which is like it's basically how would I say arbitrary rule, like arbitrariness, in the sense that anyone can just say anything, anyone can practice what constitutionalism means. There's a procedure for everything, there's a law you have to refer to. So it acts as a social instrument. I've explained this over and over again, the fact that it guides the relationship between people, how they relate with each other, How
Wait, okay,
I'm not supposed to
these
kill Toby.
people we're talking about, something just came up and it's just random. I mean, the listeners, you have to forgive me on this. It's actually random. But these people stop. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Krusty Krabs now, and SpongeBob and Co. I mean, don't get
God.
me wrong. It's not that I watch SpongeBob, but even if I do, it's none of your business.
Okay, I'll allow you to say that.
Yes, yes, thank you. And for those of you listening, right? So based on these people stuff, right? Those in that SpongeBob, please help me answer this question. Why do the people there mob the ocean floor? I think I'm hearing cricket sounds.
Oh my god! At this point,
Oh my
what are
goodness.
the mopping?
I'm sorry for that, but it was just a random thought. Just hearing people over and over again. I'm like, the people in SpongeBob under there that live close to the Krusty Krabs and all that. Why do they mob the
Describing it. Yeah, describing it like someone who watches it. But yeah,
like,
yeah,
I forgot.
yeah. Well, I think that's a question for everyone to answer. Those of us that have been watching it.
If you're a
Let's just say
listener, please leave a comment for me. I need to know. Please, Blessing, carry on.
so nice one to be. As I said, it acts as a social instrument in guiding the relationship between people. So I think it would be absurd. I can't imagine a situation, even if we would say that it's not as practical where in Nigeria, where we see there are some laws that are infringed or some rights are infringed. But when you think this constitution is not important, I just want you to immediately imagine the situation where the constitution was non-existent. So with all the infringement, with all the um with the Nigerian reality in place, we still see the essence of the constitution still being underlined. When this person is doing something that is not supposed to be done, just imagine if the constitution was not even there at all, what would then happen? Right? So when you're thinking about the importance of the constitution, think about that too. It will help you appreciate the existence of the Nigerian constitution. And with this, I hope we've had a very enlightening session. You had your notes, you've taken notes of this basic stuff. And of course, you can explain to someone better when someone asks you about the Nigerian constitution. Toby, what do you think?
Blessing, I'm not gonna lie, I've learned a lot. I mean, it serves like for people that are in the legal space and the law field, for example, it's just like a reminder, right? So it's like a refresher to me, like, oh, okay. So what you have just done now is to break it into bits and pieces to help me explain to the next person the reason why nations, and not just nations, organizations, and every other
Yeah.
part need a constitution, so they can be able to govern themselves properly. It's a hit if you ask me. I loved it, and I also hope our listeners loved this session as much as I loved it. Be enthusiastic about this session because you will be listening and you'll be receiving information that you have never heard before per se. You'll be listening to it in a new dimension, right? So stay tuned for our next part 2 coming up shortly. You will see us in no distant time. Don't worry, I know you missed us, but don't worry, you'll see us shortly. Part 2. I think we'll be discussing on the history, if I'm correct, but let's just leave it if I'm not correct because it will serve as a surprise on the next topic, right? So anticipate part 2. Don't forget to leave a comment if you have any question. And on my question about the people in Krusty Krabs, SpongeBob and Co, please, I need an answer to that so I can have peace of mind this night and go to bed. So
Good.
tell a
Yeah.
friend, tell a friend, to tell a friend, to listen, to get more knowledge, and be able to create the awareness that we are intending to create. Make life better for people to know their rights and to know exactly what is being done in the legal space or sphere of your country. Thank you guys for tuning in. I remain Toby Oraka in Nirruption, and my co-host is,
Blessings Udoh.
and we say bye. See you at another lovely time. Thank you guys for listening.
Signing out.